Thank you so much for coming, man.
Let's do that.
Thank you so much for having me. So the reason I'm not shaking your hand is because I got gum in there. Look at that. That's why I can shake this guy's hand.
That was hurtful.
I was like, God dang it.
Well, it's an honor right now to be joined by a former UFC heavyweight champion and light heavyweight champion, DC. Always great to catch up, mate.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Now, first thing I wanted to touch on was, of course, UFC 308 taking place this Sunday at 5 a.m. back home. But it's not often we talk about the co-main event before the main, but I bet you can imagine why we're going to do it this time around.
Got one of your guys.
Exactly. Our bloke, Robert Whittaker, he's on an absolute tear. How do you assess his resurgence recently?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't imagine having to rebuild in the way that he's done it multiple times.
Yeah.
So when he lost the belt the first time to Izzy, he had to go through Cannonier and all these guys to get back. Now he had to go through Paulo Costa, he had to beat Aliskerov, and now he's got to beat Chimaev, and then he still hasn't been said to be the number one contender. They say the number one contender is Sean Strickland, right? It's so clear that if Robert Whittaker wins this fight, he should be the number one contender. So his ability to rebuild, man, it's like something not like anything I've ever seen before.
Where do you think it comes from?
No idea. It's hard, man. It's hard. You know, I told Max Holloway this. I go, when I lost in Anaheim, you start thinking immediately, if I don't get a title fight right now, I don't know how I'm supposed to build my way back.
Yeah.
But Rob never thinks that. He just thinks, let's get back to work. I think it's partly him, but also the environment that he was brought up in.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a kid from Southwest Sydney, and he's been through a lot. I remember his fight at UFC 290 against Dricus du Plessis and the disappointment that followed. And your reaction, I got the sense that while you were amazed at what Dricus got to do, you were also really disappointed. I get the sense that you've got a soft spot for Rob.
I do have a soft spot for Rob, but I also felt like, look, man, and this is where I don't quite understand how he does it, because it's almost like you stick your hand close to the fire, and you stick your hand close to the fire, and you stick your hand close to the fire by fighting all these dangerous dudes, and eventually you're going to get burned.
Yeah.
And it felt like he got burned, right? Because he had worked his way to another opportunity, and then he gets knocked out. Yeah, so it was disappointment because I knew how hard he had worked to put himself back there, and you just thought that it was over. I really thought on that night, well, if you're losing, I also didn't know how good Dricus is.
I don't
right?
think
Like
any of us
I
did.
think anybody knew how good he was. So it was almost like, well, if he's losing to these types of guys, it's over for Robin. That's all he said.
Speaking of scary fighters, Khamzat Chimaev this weekend is a scary fighter. He's not Dagestani, of course he's from Chechnya, but he fights with that high-pressure wrestling style. How dangerous is he for Rob?
He's very dangerous. He's very dangerous for anybody in the world. Khamzat Chimaev is one of the best fighters in the world, and the way that he attacks guys is very unique to him and his style. You know, you kind of thought that we were seeing this because he's fighting lower-level guys. But he fought Kamaru Usman the same way, right? It is who he is, and that's what makes him scary.
From one former champion to another, what does Rob need to do to ensure victory this weekend?
He's got to set a super high pace.
Yeah.
He actually has to be the guy to set the pace.
Really?
He can't let Chimaev dictate to him when the wrestling starts, how the wrestling plays out, because if Chimaev's doing that, then he's comfortable. And honestly, even if it's a 25-minute fight, you only got to win 3 rounds. And Chimaev has the ability to go win the first 3 by being the guy setting the pace. Rob needs to set the pace because as the fight goes longer, the odds seem to sway in his direction.
Let's talk about the main event. A blockbuster atop the featherweight division involving your dear friend Max Holloway.
Yeah, it's the best. I think this is the best fight we have on the schedule right now. Holloway, Topuria, for all the reasons that the world seemed to believe. They're both insanely skilled. They're both 2 of the best featherweights. Max, one of the greatest featherweights of all time. They both have tremendous boxing. Ilya possesses outstanding wrestling, a championship mentality and aura about him that we haven't seen for a long time. And we saw what Max Holloway did. Max Holloway was thought to be a guy, had no power, but he knocked out the Zombie. He knocked out Justin Gaethje. This is a great matchup.
I can't wait for it. One man awaits the winner of this fight, hopefully in February in Sydney, our very own Alexander Volkanovski. Now, you and I spoke at this very hotel at this event last year, and you were praising Alexander Volkanovski and all that he'd been able to achieve. He was just coming off that Yair Rodriguez victory.
Yeah.
Has your opinion on him changed since then?
No. My opinion hasn't changed. Well, for one thing, the thing I think about Volk is sometimes he's too much of a fighter, right? He came in here and fought Islam Makhachev on very short notice because his mentality is he's the best. He loses. Then he turns around and he fights Topuria way too soon. I think that this break that he's on, and if he doesn't fight till February, it'll be a year since he had a fight. I think it'll serve him very well because the one thing about the Australian guys, him and Izzy, and Robert when he was the champion, the UFC rides him. More pay-per-views are headlined by those guys than anyone else in the organization. So I think Volk needed a break, but he's one of my favorite people. He's like hosted the weigh-in show with me. He's funny. This dude's crazy, man. He's awesome.
Daniel Cormier, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for coming, man.
Let's do that.
Thank you so much for having me. So the reason I'm not shaking your hand is because I got gum in there. Look at that. That's why I can shake this guy's hand.
That was hurtful.
I was like, God dang it. We had that weird handshake because I had gum in my hand. I should just threw it on the ground like I just did.
Brilliant. Okay.
Sorry, dog.
That's okay.
There we go. Let's make it better.
You can put it under the seat if you like.
That's so weird. I should have just put it under my desk like when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.